Boker Tov, good morning, Chag Sameach. It is wonderful to have all of you here. I'd like to start out with a little bit of a Hanukkah thought, if I can, and then we'll go from there. There's an interesting difference between the way that Ashkenazic Jews light the menorah and the way that Sephardic Jews light the menorah. What's the difference? And hopefully I'll get corroboration here on this. Ashkenazic Jews light the menorah where everyone in the house lights his or her own menorah, and each night they add a candle. So if I have 3 in my household, so the first night there are 3 menorahs, each with 1 candle. The second night, there are 3 menorahs, each with 2 candles, and forward. Sephardim, if I'm correct, only light 1 menorah. Regardless of how many people are in the house, they light 1 menorah, and the first night they light 1 menorah with 1 candle. The second night, they light 1 menorah with 2 candles. The third night, they light 1 menorah with 3 candles. That's a difference between the Ashkenazim and Sephardim. What's it based on? It's actually based on a passage from the Gemara in Masechet Shabbos, where the Gemara mentions that there are 3 levels when it comes to lighting Hanukkah candles. The first, the Gemara says, is the essential way in which the mitzvah is fulfilled, which is ner ish ubeso, meaning 1 candle per household. Ner ish ubeso, 1 candle per household. What does that mean? That means on the first night of Hanukkah, there's 1 candle. The second night of Hanukkah, there's 1 candle. Third night of Hanukkah, there's 1 candle.
Candle or menorah?
No,
Candle.
flame. It doesn't need to be a candle. It could be oil. It doesn't matter. So I'll use the word flame instead to make it easier to understand. The essential way of fulfilling the mitzvah, which the Gemara records, is ner ishu beso, which means on the first night of Hanukkah, 1 flame. Whatever the source of that flame is, it could be a candle, it could be a cup filled with oil and a wick. Whatever the source of that flame is, the first night of Hanukkah, 1 flame. The second night of Hanukkah, 1 flame. The third night of Hanukkah, 1 flame.
So this is 1 menorah, 1 flame.
1 menorah, 1 flame. Every single night of Hanukkah, that is called ner ish ubeso, and that is the essential way to fulfill the mitzvah of lighting the Hanukkah menorah. Do any of us do that way? No, none of us do it that way.
That's a minimal.
Even up to the 8th day, it is 1 menorah, 1 flame. Okay? That is the way in which
That's a minimalist.
that's the minimal way in which one fulfills this mitzvah. Now, sometimes you have to rely on that. It's an interesting halacha. Here's the following halacha. My daughter, Shoshana, who came in from Israel for a wedding, went back last night to Israel. We drove her to the airport. She had to be at the airport at 3:30. Okay? Drove her to the airport at 3:30. Where was she sleeping that night?
On the plane.
On the plane. Where should she light menorah? Well, she should light the menorah on the plane. Except one problem, nobody's going to let her light a menorah on the plane. So what is she supposed to do? If she was married, then she could have her husband light for her. If she was dependent on, let's say she was living in our home full time, so we could light for her. But she lives on her own. She's independent. She's single. If you know anybody good, let me know. She's living in Yerushalayim, right? She's
Not enough young men in Jerusalem.
right. She's single, and what was she supposed to do? So it's interesting when you come to the airport. We went to JFK. When you come to the airport, Chabad has this whole thing set up with you can light a menorah, you can get a donut, you can get a dreidel, you can dance, which is all very nice, but doesn't fulfill the mitzvah. Doesn't fulfill the mitzvah. First, they were lighting, it was still light outside, right? They were lighting it, from 3 o'clock on. Doesn't fulfill the mitzvah. The mitzvah needs to be filled with. So what do? So Chava knows, I think we discussed this at one point, right? What do? You take a little flashlight, and when you get on the plane, you turn on the flashlight, and after half an hour you turn the flashlight off, and you have fulfilled your mitzvah of Hadlakas Ner Chanukah. Right? Nudge your neighbor and say, hey, watch my flashlight. Right? I'm turning my flashlight on for Hanukkah candle. That's it. Yes?
It's like if you're in the hospital over Shabbos. So I was once in the hospital and over Friday night, over Shabbos. And they wouldn't let me light candles.
Right, a little.
Okay.
So what'd you do?
So I called Rabbi Lerner and I said, of course I wasn't going by the rabbi, whoever it was in the hospital at the time. And he said use an electric. I could.
There.
He said it wasn't necessary under the, if I remember correctly, but I remember I put on.
So it's an interesting question. What do you do
and
if?
I think that's what he said.
Right. So what do you do if you're in the hot? Right.
I wasn't in the
Okay.
range.
Let me come to the hospital in a minute. Wait, is that the? Let me see this. Can I put the candle next to the oxygen tank? Right. So let me come. I'll come to the hospital in a minute. Let's deal with still the lighting Hanukkah candles. You're traveling. You're on the airplane. You're not going to be in one place. You're sleeping on the airplane that night. So you fulfill the mitzvah by turning on this flashlight. Wait a second, Rabbi Polakov, how can you fulfill the mitzvah by turning on the flashlight? Can I fulfill the mitzvah with an electric menorah in my window? And the answer is no. So if I can't fulfill the mitzvah with an electric menorah in my window, I can publicize the miracle of Hanukkah with an electric menorah. That's a very nice thing to do. But I don't fulfill my obligation of lighting the menorah with an electric menorah. Why? Because the halacha is that the candle, in order for you to fulfill your obligation, the candle has to have enough fuel to burn. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The flame has to have enough fuel to burn for half an hour past the time when the stars come out. Half an hour past Seis HaKochavim. If you use a candle, let's say a Shabbos candle, one of those white Shabbos candles, no problem. How long does that burn for? Burns for a very long time. If you use a little container of oil, right, that you can buy in the store, it burns for a long time. Not a problem, right? The fuel source is there. If you use an electric menorah, there is no fuel source, right? What is fueling the menorah? The electric. What happens if not, in fact, just the opposite. What happens if the power goes out? Right? In other words, there's no intrinsic fuel source for this electric menorah. There's only a fuel source if it is plugged into the wall. And if that power were to, in other words, there's nothing intrinsic within the light. What about a battery? So the answer is a battery is much better, right? Because what is a battery? A battery is essentially a fuel source, right? And therefore, if you have a flashlight, which is essentially a light plus a battery, so turn it on, tell the person you're sitting next to that you are doing this to fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, and you're done. All right, you're done. And, after half an hour, shut it off.
Okay. So
right? Okay, so that's, why can I use, so the reason we got into this was because last night was the fourth night of Hanukkah. But I told her to use only one flashlight. Why? She didn't have to use 4 flashlights. Because the essential way to fulfill the mitzvah is one candle. Okay?
So she could shut it off. Can you then,
Can you blow out your Hanukkah candles? After half an hour, you can blow out your Hanukkah candles.
I don't
Or
recall
you should,
could,
right, you should snuff them out. You should snuff them out after half an hour. You should never go to sleep with your Hanukkah candles lit. That is dangerous. You know, I don't want to get too far off track, but every year there are instances of these things that people buy exploding. You know, the plastic melts, the glass explodes. You have to watch your Hanukkah candles. It is usser. It's usser. It's safety reasons to light your Hanukkah candles and to go somewhere. You have to light your Hanukkah candles and sit there, and sit there, and sit there, and just don't do anything. Just sit there and watch them. You know, I mean, keep an eye on them because chas v'shalom there should be a fire. We'll come back to the hospital.
Everyone was obligated to light Hanukkah candles. That it is.
Everyone, well,
You see, you're saying.
according to this essential way, says the Gemara, Ner Ishu Beso, there's 10 people living in my house, one flame.
Now
That is the essential way to fulfill the mitzvah.
So how did it come about?
Right. So okay. So before we get to Raylene's question, let's go back to Beverly for a second. What happens if you're in the hospital over Shabbos? So first of all, don't be in the hospital. Shouldn't be in the hospital. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't work. So if you have to be in the hospital, don't be in the hospital over Shabbos. Okay. Sometimes you're stuck and you have to be in the hospital over Shabbos. So what do you do about licht? Well, if you have a significant other at home, so then have that significant other light Shabbos candles, right? There's nothing wrong with a man, if that's who your significant other is, lighting the Shabbos licht. There's nothing wrong with that. All right. Generally, Shabbos licht is lit by the women of the house. That's how the mitzvah has developed, and normally that should be the case. But if for some reason the wife is not able to light, so then the husband lights. All these, wife is in the hospital delivering baby, the husband lights the candles, all right? What are you going to do? The husband lights the candles. Okay, so that's one way of dealing with it. A second way of dealing with it, let's say that there's no significant other, or there's nobody in the house, who can light for you. So then you use these preferable ways to use these battery, the chaplains come with these two little tiny, lights, la briut. They're batteries, the same principle. You flip them on and you do it that way. Right? Worst comes to worst, if that's not there, then you use the lights of the room. Right? You use the lights of the room as your Shabbos lights. Okay. Well, the nurse can shut them off. You can't shut them off. The nurse can shut them off. Assuming that it's not a Jewish nurse, which is something you have to worry about also. Okay. So that's it. Now, Raylene's question. How did we get from one candle, one flame per household to what we do today, Ashkenazim and Sephardim? How do we get there? So the Gemara says, you know what? The Gemara itself tells us there is a Mahadrin way to fulfill this mitzvah. What does the word Mahadrin mean? Special. Well, referred to when we talk about kashrus in Israel, we talk about mahadrin hashgacha. Right? In other words, it's supposed, right? It's the better hashgacha. I'll do the better out here so it won't see me on the video. Right? The better hashgacha. Okay? So that's mahadrin. Okay? So what is the mahadrin way in which to light the menorah? Says the Gemara, every person in the household lights the menorah.
Does that include the women?
Yes.
That includes every person in the household.
Or a person?
That includes every person in the household. The woman could be Yotzei with her husband, but she could also light her own menorah if she wants. Right? So how do we fulfill this mitzvah the Mahadrin way? The first night, let's say there's 3 people in my household. The first night, 3 menorahs, 1 candle. The second night, 3 menorahs, 1 candle, 1 flame.
Or 3 menorahs?
3 menorahs. What? This is one step above. This is the Mahadrin way. This is the Mahadrin way. The Mahadrin way, right? The Ner Ish Ubeito is the first night, 1 menorah, 1 flame. Second night, 1 menorah, 1 flame. Mahadran way is first night, 3 menorahs, 1 flame. Second night, 3 menorahs, 1 flame. Third night, 3 menorahs, 1 flame. That's the Mahadran way. Eighth night, 3 menorahs, 1 flame. Does anybody do it that way? No. The third way, which the Gemara tells us, is Mahadran min ha-Mahadran. Super duper kosher. Right? Mahadran min ha-Mahadran. What is Mahadran min ha-Mahadran? So here, in Mahadran min ha-Mahadran, in understanding that there is a debate between the Ashkenazic poskim and the Sephardic poskim. The Ashkenazic poskim say everything builds on everything else, right? Meaning step 2 is built on step 1. Step 3 is built on step 2. So what does that mean? It means as follows. Here we go. In an Ashkenazic home, the first night, with 3 people in the house. An Ashkenazic home with 3 people in the house. The first night, 1 menorah. Every menorah has 1 candle. Right? I'm sorry. First night, 3 menorahs, 1 candle. Thank you. Second night, in an Ashkenazic home, 3 menorahs, 2 candles. The third night in an Ashkenazic home, 3 menorahs, 3 candles. The 8th night in an Ashkenazic home, 3 menorahs, 8 candles. Now, all of these times we're talking about having a shamash. We're talking about having a shamash in addition to all the candles, okay? I don't want you... All right? Now, so what is that? So that's step 3, and it's built on step 2, which is built on step 1. All right? Sfardim say no. Sfardim say Mahadran min ha-Mahadran simply means every night you add on a candle to a single menorah. Therefore, in a Sephardic household with 3 people, first night, 1 menorah, 1 candle. Second night, 1 menorah, 2 candles. Third night, 1 menorah, 3. 8th night, 1 menorah, 8 candles. That's the difference between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim, how they understand Mahadran min ha-Mahadran. Okay, clear? Somebody had a question? No?
Yes. Oh, yeah. About the way that you light the candles. It's far, I think ours far
In the opposite
different. You don't use the shamash to light the other ones. You have an extra candle, and when you do the brachas, you start lighting the shamash, and then you light the other ones.
Then what's
So
that?
the shamash doesn't move.
Well, I think a lot of that is simply dependent on the structure of the menorah. In other words, if you're using oil, right? If you're using oil, you can't move the oil. You can't move the oil. If you're using candles, it's one thing. But if you're using oil, you can't. We use oil. We use a candle to light the other ones.
So we
Okay.
light all the, we light the candle that we add that night first, and we go all the way from.
Yeah, everyone does that.
And the shamash.
Oh, you do in the end.
Oh, that's interesting. You do the shamash at the end. That's interesting. Okay. We do the shamash in the beginning and then light the other candle. Okay, very interesting. Yes.
I have a comment or a question. Growing up, I never knew anybody who lived more than one menorah. It started when children would make menorahs in school and bring home their own menorah, and the parents said, okay, you want to light your own. But
I think it depends on what community. I mean, I think in certain communities, even growing up, that was the standard. I mean, the standard has always been a menorah for, for each person in the house. Now, I would say in many homes, women and men like husbands and wives light one menorah together. I think in many homes. The children light their menorahs, but in many homes, husband and wife light one menorah. Beverly.
I think we did it when the children went to school, because that's when the children were old enough to.
Yeah, that's correct. Right, you're right. That's when the children. Right. I mean, that probably goes together. Yes.
Thought that the women had to observe this because of the miracle of Judah.
And
this is like with Esther, even though it's time bound, since we participated, that we had an obligation, not through our husbands, but through ourselves. That's
Okay,
what I was
so the answer to that is there are two separate things here.
Okay.
One is the lighting of the menorah.
Right.
the lighting of the menorah can be fulfilled by one person for everybody in the house. And it could be, so that means if the husband is in charge of the house, he can light the menorah and fulfill the obligation for everyone. If the wife is in charge of the house, she can light the menorah and fulfill everyone's obligation. If the husband's traveling on business, he can say to his wife, could you please light the menorah for me? Right? But there's no separate obligation in the essential way in which this mitzvah is fulfilled. There's no separate obligation on every member of the household.
So it's not like
So
Lulav,
no,
it's
so
not
Ray,
like the Megillah.
no, it's not an obligation on every person in its essential form.
Okay.
In its mahadrin in its mahadrin form, it is an obligation on every person. In its mahadrin mahadrin form, the way the Ashkenazic Jews understand it, it's an obligation. But in its essential form, it is not an obligation on every person. But Raylene is making reference to a very interesting minhag. I don't know how many of you observe this minhag. There is a minhag that all the time while the candles are burning, or while the neiros are burning, that women do not do malacha. Women do not do malacha. And why is that?
Because the candles are meant to observe the miracle, not to have a secondary benefit from it.
No, because of exactly what you said. Since the part of the miracle of Hanukkah came about through Judith, all right. Part of the miracle of Hanukkah came about that way. So women have a special obligation, or women have a special custom. The Shulchan Aruch says not to work for that half an hour. All right. Men have no such custom. Right? Men can be putting the kids to bed. They can be doing the dishes. Men, I remember when our kids were young. My wife would say, okay, kids have to go to bed. Dishes have to be cleaned. I'm just going to sit here and watch the Hanukkah candles. All right? So, okay. So, but that's, I think that's what you're referring to. Okay. So now, here's my question. Why Hanukkah candles are we all so careful to do the mitzvah mahadrin min ha-mahadrin? In other words, none of us light one candle every single night. We all do the mitzvah mahadrin min ha-mahadrin. We're all super duper religious when it comes to Hanukkah. But are we super duper religious when it comes to other mitzvahs? I mean, hopefully we are, but probably not as super duper religious as we are when it comes to Hanukkah. So one answer is, come on, it's easy. All I have to do is put another candle in. To be super duper religious when it comes to Shabbos is a little bit more challenging. To be super duper religious when it comes to, kashrus is a little bit more challenging. It's easy to be super duper religious when it comes to lighting the menorah.
But with other mitzvahs, like you put a Shabbos as your example, that would be very broad. Where do you draw in?
No, so okay, whatever it is, wherever you want to draw that line, however you want to understand it, however you want to do that, okay. Most of us are makpid on Hanukkah to be super duper religious, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I'm saying it only in a positive way. Mahadrin mina mahadrin when it comes to lighting the menorah, and we're not necessarily as careful in other mitzvos to always be mahadrin mina mahadrin. In other words, sometimes we'll say, all right, this hashgacha is good enough. Do I have to get, it has to be mahadrin mina mahadrin. Okay. So why?
Well, that's how, I didn't know there was any other way.
Okay, so one answer is good, Baruch Hashem. Right? Why are we mahadrin mina mahadrin? That's the way we light the menorah. But now that we know this, now that we know that there are other ways, so why are we mahadrin mina mahadrin? So you all know the story of Hanukkah. You know this because from the time you were growing up, from the time you taught your children, what's the story of Hanukkah? The Chashmonaim came into this defiled Beis Hamikdash, and what did they find? They found all the oil had been contaminated by the Syrian Greeks. Except for what? Except for one little... I like the word cruise. It's the only time I ever use that word cruise, right? Right? One little cruise, one little jug, one little jar of oil. And how did they know that oil was not defiled? there was a seal on the oil. What did the seal say? Right? Right? It didn't say Vad HaRabbanim of Queens. Right? It didn't say OU. Right? What did it? It had the seal of the Kohen Gadol, of the previous Kohen Gadol. It had the seal. Wow. They opened that up and they used that menorah. They used that oil to light the menorah. It's only a little bit, only enough for one night. And wow, what happened? Miracle. Okay. Listen to this. Why does the Kohen Gadol why was there a jar of oil that had the seal of the Kohen Gadol in it? Like, what's that all about? Why did the Kohen Gadol have a jar of oil with his own personal seal on
Is
it?
it the anointing oil?
What? Wasn't the anointing oil? No.
It's not that he knew, Kohen Gadol, he knew that
He knew that this was going to happen one day, so he hid.
she wanted to, no, it was not.
No. So listen to this. Listen to this. Who prepared when we're talking about the oil, we're talking about the lighting of the menorah, right? Did the Kohen Gadol prepare the oil for the lighting of the menorah?
No.
Who prepared the oil for the lighting of the menorah? Other Kohanim. Right? Other Kohanim. And it was a big deal to prepare the oil for the lighting of the menorah because the oil for the lighting of the menorah had to come from the first drops of oil that came from the olives. It had to be pure. Had to come from those first drops of oil. So imagine, that took a long time, right? They had to press the olives and only the first drops that came out they could use for the menorah. It took a long time to produce the oil. And there were lots of Kohanim who had the responsibility of doing this. Right? You may sort of wonder, like, what were the Kohanim doing all day long, you know? Right? They were offering karbanos and they, right? Pressing olives. Right? There was a lot of work to be done. Okay, anyway, so listen. The Kohen Gadol every day had to bring a special korban. Kohen Gadol, every day. It was a korban of meal. It was a meal offering. Flour, right? When I say meal, I'm talking about flour. A flour offering. And the Kohen Gadol would mix oil into that flour, Flour, offering. Okay, into the flour offering. The Kohen Gadol would mix oil in. What kind of oil did he use? Regular olive oil. He didn't need, the obligation was not to use pure olive oil. He used, let's say, grade B or grade C olive oil. Okay? That's what he did every day. The Kohen had the olive oil, there was menorah olive oil, and then there was olive oil that the Kohen would use for his korban, and that was of a lower quality. You couldn't use that oil that the Kohen Gadol would use. You couldn't use that in the menorah. The menorah needed to have pure olive oil, not grade A, not grade C.
It's not katit.
Katit, right? Katit means crushed. Okay?
But the first,
So, right, so what happened? So this particular Kohen Gadol, we don't know the name, this particular Kohen Gadol decided that he was going to bring his korban not simply in the way in which it was allowed, but he was going to bring his korban in the best possible way. So yes, could he have used grade B or grade C olive oil? Yes. Most Kohanim Gedolim used grade B or grade C olive oil. We're talking about olive oil that's mixed with probably some impurities and whatever, it's not the pure olive oil. Virgin olive, it's not the virgin, it's not the extra virgin olive oil.
The first press.
Right? Not the first pressed extra virgin. He used, this particular Kohen Gadol chose to use pure olive oil for his meal offering. In other words, he went out of his way to use pure olive oil for his offering. He didn't need to. He could have fulfilled his mitzvah just by using grade B or grade C olive oil. But he went out of his way to use grade A, pure olive oil, right? This pure olive oil. So now what happens? the Hashmonaim come into the Beis Hamikdash, right? Everything's been defiled. They find this little cruse of oil with the Kohen Gadol's seal on it, and they say, "Oh, it's grade B or grade C, right? We can't use it for the menorah." They open it up, and what do they see? It's grade A. Because this Kohen Gadol chose to bring his carbon in the best possible way, in the Mahadrin min ha-Mahadrin way, the Hashmonaim had oil to use to light the menorah. And therefore, no, I don't. And therefore, when we light the menorah, we do it in the Mahadrin min ha-Mahadrin way, because we commemorate the way in which that menorah in the days of the Hashmonaim was lit. I don't think I've ever seen his name anywhere. I don't know. Anyway, so an interesting piece of the story that we don't learn when we're growing up. Right? An interesting piece of the story that we don't learn, and that's perhaps explains why we choose to do our mitzvah in the Mahadrin min ha-Mahadrin way. Even though it's interpreted differently by Ashkenazim and Sfardim, the way in which we choose to do it. What?
It's the same thing. Explanation.
In the days of the Beis Hamikdash, there were no Ashkenazim and Sfardim. They were just Jews. They were just Jews in the days of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay? Right? Ashkenazim and Sfardim came much later. They were just Jews in the days of the Beis Hamikdash. That's the story is the same. The story is the same for everybody. Yes. That's the story. The story is the same for everybody. How we manifest that Mahadrin and a Mahadrin differs between Ashkenazim and Sfardim. Right? In other words, the basic debate is how to understand the Gemara. But the story is the same. The story is the same. Okay. So an interesting piece, and you can share it on your Shabbos table. Ask people, gee, why do we light the menorah, Mahadrin min ha-Mahadrin, and see what they say. Okay, good. Let's get back to our topic. Our topic is the burial of Aharon Kohen Gadol. Okay?
Okay, so Rabbi, you have to add half an hour to it.
Our topic is the burial. It'll be like a miracle. We'll just keep going and keep going and keep going for 8 days, right? So the back to the topic of the burial of Aharon. What page are we on?
849.
We're on page 849, right? We're on page 849.
Rabbi, you don't know how much excitement we have. Shabbos table with the halachot of the.
Oh, great. We're having Shabbos lunch. Let's talk about Tachrichin. All right, Baruch Hashem.
She went through very hard times.
Okay. So the Torah tells us 848, 849. Torah tells us that Moshe did what HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded him. Verse 28, Vayavshet Moshe es Aharon es begadav, Vayalbesh Osam es Elazar bino, Vayamas Aharon sham berosh hahar, that Aharon died there on the top of the mountain. Hor hahar is the name of the mountain. Vayered Moshe ve'Elazar minahar, and Moshe and Elazar come down from the mountain. So there is the Rabbeinu Bechaye says the following. Rabbeinu Bechaye says what happened. Amar lo Moshe. Moshe said to Aharon. Now we're on the top of Hor Hahar. Moshe said to Aharon, Hachnes or Hikanes lima'ara. What was on the top of the mountain? There was a mi'ara. A mi'ara meaning a cave. There was a cave on the top of the mountain. He says, go into the cave. V'nichnas. And Aharon went into the cave. Ra'a mita mutza'at v'ner daluk. What did Aharon see? There was a place to lie down, and there was a candle that was lit there. Amar lo Moshe Rabbeinu said to him, Alei lamita. Go and lie on that bed. Not really, not a bed in the classical sense, right? But go and lie on that bed. What did Aharon do? V'Allah. Aharon went up and lie down on the bed. Obviously, had to get up on the bed. Moshe said to him, Pshot yadcha, stretch out your hands, stretch out your arms. All right? What happened? Upashat. Aaron stretched out his arms. This idea that people are buried like this, Jews are not buried like this. Right? Jews are not buried like this. Right? Jews are buried with their arms straight by their sides. One of the things the Chevra Kadisha is supposed to do, or one of the things that you should do if you happen to be present at the time when someone passes away, is to straighten out their limbs. Sometimes people pass away, they're sleeping on their sides, or they pass away in one of these hospital beds and if you don't make the bed flat, and if you don't straighten out the limbs, what happens? The body becomes rigid, right? The body becomes rigid in that position. And sometimes it's impossible, without breaking bones, which you don't want to do, it's impossible to straighten out the body, which makes it much more difficult to bury this person properly. So one of the things that you should do if you happen to be present when someone passes away and you're sure they passed away, in other words, don't do this if you think they haven't passed away yet, right? Because you could cause them to pass away by doing this. But once you know the person has passed away, so you should make sure that they're on their back, flat on their back. Right? Make sure the person is flat on his or her back. Okay, take away a pillow. Well, you can leave a pillow under the head. The head should be a little bit elevated. Straighten out the arms. Uncurl the fingers. Right? Sometimes the fingers are curled up. Uncurl the fingers. Straighten the legs. Right? So that when the body becomes rigid, it becomes rigid in that position. Okay, that's part of what the Chevra Kadisha does when they come to remove the body from the hospital, from the home, wherever it is. Okay, and this is precisely what Aharon did when he went up on this place. Moshe Rabbeinu said to him, Kmotz picha. What is kmotz picha? Close your mouth. Right, when a person passes away, we want to keep the mouth closed. Close your mouth. Atzum einecha. Close your eyes. And that's what Aharon did. Miyad, when Moshe Rabbeinu saw how peaceful this was, Miyad chamad Moshe la'osa misa. Moshe immediately desired to die in the same way. In other words, when my time comes, I want to go with the same peace. You know, if you've ever seen a person pass away who's suffering, the anguish is, it's almost like death is a relief under those circumstances. Here it was just very peaceful. Aaron climbed up on the bed, lied down, stretched out his arms, his legs, closed his mouth, closed his eyes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took his neshama. Moshe Rabbeinu said, okay. So, what's the issue that we have to deal with? Raylene asked us the question last week, and that is, where was Aharon buried? In a cave. Are we allowed to bury someone in a cave? So clearly the answer is yes. All right? Because we know way back when in the Torah that Abraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah, along with probably Adam and Chava, are buried in a cave. What cave? Me'arat Machpelah. What does Me'ara mean? It means a cave. Yes, there's this great big building there, but they're not buried in the building. They're buried underneath in the cave, right? They're buried underneath in the cave. And all these stories about trying to go down to see the kever, how do you get down there?
But there is.
Of course.
No, I mean, two students, Yeshiva.
Correct.
They went down.
Yes, correct.
I sent it to people.
Okay. So clearly, right? Okay. But it's in a cave. And we also see here, Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, where is Aharon to be buried? To be buried in this cave, on top of Hor HaHar, in this cave, right? Now, I'm sure it's like cut out into the mountain, that little cave. Okay, can you bury someone in a cave? Yes. Wait a second, I thought you had to bury someone in the ground. How do we know that you have to bury someone in the ground? How do we know that? Where is that halacha? So I want you to flip ahead in your Chumash to Dvarim. I want you to flip ahead in the Chumash to Dvarim 21, chapter 21, verse 22. I'll give you the page in a second.
24.
Yes, good. Raylene has it, 1048, page 1048. Verse 22, what does the Torah say there? Parshas Kiseitze. The Torah says, V'chi yeh v'ish chet mishpat maves. That when a person transgresses a capital offense, meaning he or she is to be executed. V'humas, and that person is executed by Beis Din. What happens after that person is executed? V'salisa oso al ha'etz. What do you do with the body? After the person is executed by Beis Din, what do you do with the body? You hang it from a tree. This sounds strange, right?
Yeah.
Right? This was part of the, page 1048, part of the punishment, and ultimately that punishment is intended to bring about kapara. It's intended to bring about atonement for the person who transgressed. Meaning what? Meaning that you transgress, and as a result of your transgression, you are going to be punished. And the severity of that punishment will ultimately bring about atonement for the sin that you've transgressed. Okay? So a person is to be executed, whether it's by stoning or whatever. Are we cold in here? Yes. Whether it's by... Okay. Whether it's by stoning, whatever, right? There's this punishment. And then the Beis Din is obligated to take the body and to hang it from a tree. Seems to be a disgrace, right? To the body, right? Imagine you're taking this person. It's not bad enough that this person was stoned in front of everybody, but now you're taking the body and you're hanging the body from a tree. All part of this concept of deterrent, right? It's all part of this concept of a deterrent. Hashem wanted capital punishment to be gruesome. Hashem wanted people to see capital punishment and say, you know what? I think maybe I won't violate Shabbos. Because what's going to be the result of your violating Shabbos in front of witnesses? You're going to be executed in this gruesome way, and then your body's going to be hung from a tree. So yes, it would be wonderful if everybody would say, you know, I'm going to observe the mitzvos because they're so meaningful for me, and you know, I learned about them in seminary, but in reality, sometimes we don't reach that madrega. Sometimes we observe the mitzvos because we're afraid of the punishment that's going to come about when we don't observe the mitzvos. So this was part of that deterrent, a gruesome execution, and the body being hung on a tree. Now, again, the whole purpose for this, in addition to the deterrent, was to bring kapara to the individual who transgressed.
But he's dead already.
Well, kapara for his neshama, right? I mean, correct. But that death was part of the kapara.
But hanging from the tree is a visual for everybody else, because the birds are going to come and animals are going to come.
No, the body has to be protected. You're not allowed. Birds are right. It's not like you hung the person on the tree and came back a week later. No, you executed the person.
So it's still a visual, or you?
Of course, it's still a visual. You executed the person. The body was then hung from a tree. Right? Not with like a noose around the neck, right? Right? That's not how they hung a body from the tree. Right? The body was hung on the tree, and then the body was taken down right away. Right? It wasn't like hung up there for like hours. It was put on, it was taken down. And what happened? Look at the verse. The Torah says, Pasuk 23, Lo salini v'laso al ha'etz. Don't leave the body on the tree. What do you mean don't leave the body on the tree? Mean don't leave the body on the tree overnight. Ki kavur tikberenu bayom hahu. What do you have to do? You have to bury it on that same day. Ki kavur tikberenu bayom hahu. Ki kilalas elokim talui. Because since a person is created in the image of God, to see this body hanging up on the tree is also a difficult expression. It's also it's also difficult for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we're looking at the body and this is the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's obviously, we know when we say the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have red hair, he doesn't have freckles, he doesn't have dimples, right? Or he doesn't, or she doesn't have dimples, I don't know, whatever, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu isn't male or female, Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have an appearance, but we look at a human being as an embodiment of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore for this body to be hung up on the tree, Kilas Elokim Talui, it is considered blasphemous, it is considered denigrating to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We're told to do it, but then we have to bury the body. We're not allowed to allow the body to remain overnight. You have to bury the body by Yom Hahu on that day. Ki kabur tik berenu by Yom Hahu. Okay. From here we learn the obligation of burying on the same day that the person has died. Ki lalas Elokim talui and ki kabur tik berenu by Yom Hahu. Okay. You have to bury the body by Yom Hahu on that particular day. All right, that is the obligation. Ki kavor tikbarenu bayomahu. Person dies, you bury the body on that day, whenever it's possible.
But this person didn't die; he was killed.
Okay, same thing. Well,
No, there's a difference.
That's correct, right? This person was executed by Bezdin, but what we're being told is the phrase ki kavor tikbarenu bayomahu. Bury him on that day. It doesn't, so the rabbis learn from here, the Gemara in Masechah Sanhedrin learns from here, that it's not just referring to the person who was executed, it's referring to anybody who dies. Anybody who dies has to be buried, ki kavor tikbarenu bayamahu, on that particular day. That's one thing that we learn from this verse. Right, has to be bayamahu. What do you mean bayamahu? Person dies at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Sunset is 4:15. How can I bury a person at that day? So sometimes you can't. Right? Sometimes you can't. In Yerushalayim, they bury that night. Right? You can't bury, right? A person dies at 2 o'clock. As soon as they are able to, they bury the person. It's pitch black. Doesn't matter. Chevra Kadisha buries people in Yerushalayim. It's pitch black. It's irrelevant. They bury middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning. Because of Yerushalayim, because of the Kedusha of Yerushalayim, they do not want to allow a body to remain unburied overnight. We, outside of Yerushalayim, are a little bit less makpid on that, especially here in America where we can't bury at night. We're a little bit less makpid on that.
We're not 100.
Right. We're a little bit less makpid on that, but the basic idea is if we can bury the same day, we try to bury the same day, of course. There are some reasons why there are some heterim, there are some reasons why we are allowed to delay the burial. One of the reasons why we are allowed to delay the burial has to do with kavod hames, with the honor for the person who's died. If, let's say, a child of a person who's died cannot be there and is not going to be able to get in until the next day, person's in Florida, person was traveling, whatever, so we allow the postponement of the funeral for kavod hames. We do not allow the postponement of the funeral for convenience. In other words, Tanta Fega, who happens to be 90 and living in Florida, it's going to take her 4 days to get up here. No, we don't do that for Tanta Fega, right? We don't do it for convenience. But if a child is away, and what about if a child's away and can't get back for 3 days or 4 days? We ignore the child and we just go ahead and do the burial.
Even if it's for the son, the only son?
Yes, even if it's for the only son. We go ahead and we do the burial. All right, Ki kavor tikbarenu bayamahu, this is a serious obligation. Yes?
Sorry, Rabbi. So if I didn't make it to my calendar, you think they should wait for me?
No.
Because the airline canceled the flight?
No, because your sons your brothers were there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
So it's okay. So it's not...
It's not, in fact, if anything, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
That they did what they should have done.
Yes.
They did what they should have done.
Yes. Now another question. Hashem didn't... What Hashem said that the Adamat Hashu.
Okay, so this is the second thing we learn, all right? The burial should be by Yom Hahu on that day. What does it mean, burial? What does burial mean? Right? What about if I take a body and I put the body in a casket and I leave the casket in my garage?
No, it has to be covered by something.
Is that burial?
No, it has to be
Right.
covered by something.
Why is that? What?
It has to be.
Okay, good. I'll throw some earth on top of it.
In the ground.
In my garage.
In the ground.
Right? Can I do that?
Is it an underground?
Obviously, I can't do that, right? Because we are told the El Ha'adamah Sashuv, that the body comes from the earth and it is supposed to return to the earth. From here we learn that the mitzvah of kvura means in the earth. The mitzvah of kvura means in the earth. The body has to be buried in the earth. Okay, very nice. Body has to be buried in the earth. Okay? Okay, we're all familiar with that. What do? We dig a hole. Right? We dig a hole. We don't call it a hole, we call it a grave. Right? Because pasnish. But we dig a hole and we take the body in a box and we put the body, instead of the garage, we put the body in the hole. And then what do? Then we fill up the hole. We call that burial. Okay, that's burial. That's very nice if you live in Long Island and you can drive out to Farmingdale and there's lots of land.
But if you don't have any.
But what do you do if you live in a place where there's no ground to bury? Right? There's no ground to bury.
If there's a high water table.
Okay? No ground to bury. We're going to end with this video. I'm sorry, it's only like a 3-minute video. All right, I just don't want to begin with the video next week, so we'll end with the video and we'll talk about the halachic ramifications of it in Yirtzeh Hashem next week.
Underground burial in caves and tunnels was common in biblical times and for thousands of years in the Holy Land as well as Europe. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. In our day, due to population growth and land costs, along with the attempt to preserve green areas, cemeteries have become a nuisance, especially in cities and other large communities. They are lifeless islands in the midst of heavily populated areas. Cities worldwide are seeking to allocate less land to maintain current burial practices. Our innovative solution to this global dilemma: reviving burial in tunnels. A successful pilot experiment in Jerusalem led to a large-scale project currently being built underneath the city's main cemetery. The present project for the construction of 22,000 dignified, respectable plots will be implemented in stages and can start accommodating burials within approximately 2 years. One of our major goals is making the new underground cemetery a pleasant, serene place to visit in any weather. All religious guidelines and rites are being taken into consideration, alongside the required engineering aspects. We offer tailor-made solutions while working closely with each community, honoring its local customs and cooperating with its municipal bylaws to build the most suitable underground cemetery for that area. Environmental concerns are constantly borne in mind. Burial tunnels have many environmental, social, and economic advantages. They will be close enough to cities and other communities for family members to visit, and yet preserve the topographical landscape and eliminate the lifeless islands that most modern cemeteries have become. We are certain that reviving the practice of subterranean burial, which started in Jerusalem, will become a beacon for the planning of future cemeteries around the world.